Today on the 01581, a conversation with Jenny Gingras, our Director of Planning, talking about zoning changes related to accessory dwelling units. Hi, and welcome to this episode of the 01581 Let's Talk. I'm joined today by Jenny Gingras. She's our Director of Planning. Jenny's been on before to talk about other things, but today we're going to talk about accessory dwelling units. And since in government we love to have acronyms, that's ADU. So if you hear saying ADU, it's accessory dwelling units. And Jenny, welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the initiative to say, hey, this is something that's happening like real time, and how do we get this information out to the public? So
yeah,
appreciate you being
it's definitely important. I know it's been in the news a lot,
Yep.
so it's good to get
Great.
it out there.
Great. So take it away, and I'll ask questions as we go.
Okay, sounds good. So in Westborough, as every municipality in the state of Massachusetts, we are required now to comply with Chapter 40A, specifically Section 3,
Okay.
where accessory dwelling units are now a protected use.
Mm-hmm.
So that's similar to churches, schools, things like that.
Okay.
So what we have to do is change our zoning to reflect the now protected uses in Chapter 40A.
Okay.
So that's what this is.
Okay. All right.
So I'll just talk a little bit about the state legislative changes. These were really done in response to the ongoing housing crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And so the state took action by passing this new legislation in October of 24. Specifically, it's Section 8, Chapter 150 of the Acts of 24. I have a link at the end of the presentation that I'll share on the website also.
Awesome. Great.
For people that are interested in reading
Dive
legislation.
right into legislation.
Yeah.
Hey, sometimes with a good cup of coffee, there's nothing better than a good piece of legislation to
There you
read.
go. So essentially, like I said, it amends the zoning act to make it easier for home buyers or homeowners
Mm-hmm.
to build ADUs or accessory dwelling units by right in single-family zoning districts.
Okay.
This means that homeowners no longer need special approvals, so no longer a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals or Planning Board, and they can create these small independent living spaces on their property.
Okay. Great. And will we discuss sort of the changes specific here in Westborough? Because ADUs are not new to our zoning. We've
Correct.
had some. Will we talk about that today?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yep, we
All right.
will.
Awesome. Super.
Yeah. So I touched on this a little bit, but the purpose of this law was really to increase the housing opportunities, providing an alternative option for seniors who want to age in place or individuals that may have medical needs and then their caregivers, which has been the purpose of ADUs all along. But in Massachusetts, a lot of towns or municipalities prohibit ADUs or have heavy restrictions on them.
Yep.
So this kind of allows for that greater flexibility.
Yeah, kind of really the ability for the homeowner to maximize use of their property and potentially to bring in some other income as well. Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And one thing that I really like the thought of is intergenerational living. That was really prominent back in the 50s and earlier, and we've kind of gone away from that. So I think with this change, it will start to come forward a little more.
Sure. Well, and we it's not an uncommon conversation that I've been in where folks are saying, my kids have come back home to live with me, and they're sort of living in the basement. So,
Right.
Potentially you have someone who's living in their home. The home is now maybe a little more crowded because those folks have come back and they're like, I don't need to live in this big home. Maybe I could have an ADU and my kids could live in the big home.
Right.
And, now we have that intergenerational, but yet we have our own space.
Yes.
Yeah, which
Your
is
own
nice.
space is needed.
Oh,
It can get a little stressful, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
So this also changes the permitting process, which I had said. So it goes from typically, and I'll talk a little bit more about specifically to Westborough, but it changes it from kind of a long and expensive permitting process to go through the Zoning Board of Appeals to just by right, which means that you can just apply for a building permit.
Okay, great, okay. And just generally speaking, just the ADUs for benefits, are you gonna talk about kind of what's allowed from a footprint perspective?
Yep.
Like, okay, super,
Yep.
great. All right.
This is one of my favorite slides because I love Happy Days. I watched it as a
I did
as a
too,
kid. It was on
yeah.
Nick at Night when I was a kid, but it was
Okay,
just,
so you're that much younger than me, because it was like prime time. Okay, so this show is over,
but it was
right?
like
This
the
is
next,
just,
it was the next
It was
generation.
it was such a great show.
Yeah, it was such a great show, and I really liked
All right,
it.
who's your favorite character?
I don't know. I liked Mrs. Cunningham.
Oh my God, I was
honestly.
just gonna say that.
Really?
I was gonna say, I think I like Mrs. Cunningham the best. It's so funny.
like she always was, I think, the driving force for the family
Yeah.
and kept everything
Yeah.
together. And
And as I
she's just
recall, she had a
funny.
good sense of humor, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All
Yeah.
right, I got to go back and watch some episodes. Okay,
Yes,
go ahead.
we'll have to find what it's on now. So anyway, ADUs offer those significant benefits for both property owners and occupants. So for homeowners, like you had mentioned, they can provide a low-cost housing option for your adult children or relatives, create a long-term solution for seniors to downsize and be able to stay in their community.
Absolutely.
And then offer that rental income to help with maintenance costs, taxes, things like that.
Absolutely.
All those costs that are coming
Sure.
up for all of us.
Sure.
And then for occupants, they are a great fit for smaller households. They offer a way for longtime Westborough residents to stay in the neighborhoods they love. And they're generally more affordable than traditional housing because they're smaller. So this example here is from the sitcom Happy Days. And I didn't remember this until I found it. It was actually on the AARP website where they have a ton of resources on ADUs and,
yes,
and
they do.
zoning.
Yeah.
It's great. And I thought, this is so great because I never thought twice about it when I was watching Happy Days.
Right.
But Fonzie rented the apartment above the garage for the Cunninghams, and it was because they were concerned that their hardware store was going to close.
Oh,
And so they wanted the extra income. The hardware store ended up being fine.
Yep.
But that's just, I think a great example, and at least
This
for
is
me,
1950s.
it was the
Based on
1950s,
when it was set.
Milwaukee,
Yep.
and no one thought twice about it.
Right.
It made sense. They got the extra income.
Yep. Absolutely.
So,
Yep.
and then just a fun fact.
Yep.
People in Queensland, which is a state in Australia, they call their overgarage apartments Fonzie flats.
Really?
Yeah. I think we should bring that here to the
Maybe.
U.S.
All right. There you go. All right.
Okay.
Okay.
So, these are what we can do as a municipality, what we can and can't do.
Sure.
So, the municipality or Westborough, we can't require a special permit or any other discretionary zoning approval for the use or the rental.
With the rental. Yep. Okay.
We can't require more than one parking space for an ADU. So you have a parking minimum for like a standard single family. So this is an addition.
Okay.
So you can't say that an ADU needs 2 or 3 parking spaces.
Okay. So, but it doesn't require a minimum of 1. Is that a requirement
For the single family?
So you have a single family that, and what is that requirement? 2. Okay. So now I want to build an ADU, a detached or attached, whatever I'm going to do. Am I required to have 1 additional?
Yes.
1 additional is a requirement. Okay.
Unless it's within half a mile of a transit station.
And then I'm not required.
And then you're not required.
Okay. Okay.
So it's kind of promoting, the walkability of the area.
Okay. Okay. And this might get a little technical. So do the changes in the bylaw alter zoning setbacks? So let's say I've got my driveway, right? And then off to the right of my driveway, I've got some green space, right? So, in my mind as a homeowner, I could put another parking space there, but that's within, it's going to create impervious surface, and it's going to get closer to my lot line. Like, do the zoning changes account for that and allow me to do that now?
We still need to comply with all dimensional requirements,
Dimensional
including
requirements.
setbacks for driveways, open space, so those things are still in place.
Okay.
It doesn't
okay.
change.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, you said that much more eloquently than I do. Dimensional
No, that's fine.
requirements. Okay.
It's been a big question because, you know, there's still Title V requirements with septic.
Yes.
There's,
I was going to ask you about the sewer, but we'll hold that for a later question.
Okay.
Okay, yep.
Yep. So, but we would just go by the same rules that we have in place.
Okay.
And I can touch on the sewer a little bit. But before I do, I just
Yes.
wanted to also say, because this is a concern of some municipalities, I don't think really Westborough, but short-term rentals, so like your
Like Airbnb.
Airbnb,
kind of, yep.
thank you, or I can't remember.
VRBOs or
Yes.
whatever. Yep.
So we can still prohibit those.
Okay. But I see here that municipalities cannot require the owner occupancy. So I could have a home, I could rent my home, and I could rent the ADU and live someplace else.
Yes,
Under
technically,
this
yes.
new law.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But the town can put a restriction on short-term rentals.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the
Okay.
town cannot go around the law, which, you know, right now it says that it doesn't require owner occupancy.
Okay.
Which in Westborough we had in our
Yes,
bylaw.
we did. Yeah, and attached, right?
Yes, and it
Attached.
was required that it was
Yep.
it would be attached.
Yep.
So that's changed.
Yes.
So our bylaw reflects exactly what the legislation is saying.
now.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Great.
Yep.
Okay.
And then on sewer, so it's the same as we would look at now.
Okay.
They would look at an addition of a bedroom and how
Okay.
many gallons per day that
Okay.
generates.
Okay.
So it'd be the same permitting we would do now for an ADU or
Okay.
for an addition to a home.
Okay. And so because this is, we're having this conversation in late January, there's still a sewer moratorium. So if I'm a homeowner and I have 3 bedrooms in my house, and there's a sewer moratorium, and I want to build an ADU soon, what's my process now knowing that there's a sewer moratorium in place?
I'm trying to remember if the sewer moratorium capped it at 3 or 4 bedrooms.
Yeah, and I just wrote 3, but
yeah.
let's just say that they're, well, I guess where do I go first? Do I come to the planning department? Do I go to DPW? Like, where does that process start? At least for me to even understand, can I even start this process?
Yeah, so we always recommend coming to the planning department or
Okay.
community development department first,
Yep.
because there's so many more things to look at besides sewer.
Sure.
And then we tell that person or that family to go and talk to, engineering to understand their sewer allocation.
Okay.
And things like that, because there's a lot of homework that needs to be done before applying for a building permit.
Right. Okay, so
know.
really start with the community development or planning department.
Right.
Okay.
And we can break it down exactly what
Okay.
you need to do.
Okay. With respect to, so Title V, for those that aren't familiar, that is septic, on-site septic, right? That's what
Yes.
Title V is?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Yep.
And then, so does this change, or maybe, does this change allow, so I've got an existing septic system on site, it's got X capacity, and the capacity was aligned, I presume, with the primary dwelling. Can the ADU be tied in, or do I have to expand capacity, or how does that work?
You'll most likely have to expand capacity, but that's
Okay.
something that you would have to talk to the health department about
Okay.
to understand what the existing capacity of your system is.
Okay.
And if you need to expand it.
Okay.
And oftentimes we see that it needs to be expanded because
Okay.
it's built for a specific house.
Sure.
And
Okay.
a specific amount of bedrooms.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So health department oversees that, but again, if they start the conversation with the planning department, you can direct them based
Yes.
on. Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
absolutely.
Super. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So these are some other requirements, and these are mostly what the legislation requires, but also it's tailored to be what will be.
I like the visual. This is very helpful.
Yeah,
Thank you. Okay.
that was from, I think, AARP. Yeah. it helps to understand what all of these look like.
Yeah, well, and what are the options, right? Okay.
Yeah, so it can be attached or detached. Currently in Westborough's bylaw, we do allow ADUs by right, but they have to be attached.
And have a common entrance, right?
I don't think it's a common entrance.
Okay. Well, it doesn't matter anymore anyway. 'cause
Yeah,
this is
it
the
may
new reg.
it may reflect that in the zoning,
Okay.
but the code won't allow, the building code won't allow for a
Okay,
common
okay,
entrance.
okay,
Yeah,
all right,
you have to have a separate entrance.
Okay.
And right now in Westborough, we currently have no larger than half the gross floor area of the principal dwelling, or 1,000 square feet, whichever is smaller.
Okay.
So if you have a 2,000, I guess, would come out to 1,000. If you if you have a
2,500.
20, well, now I have to split that in half. Let's go 4,000.
Okay, let's go
That's
for-
about the average size of a single-family home now being built is about
Is it
4,000.
really?
It's high.
Wow. Okay.
It's
All
high.
right. Well, since
So
it's simple
4,000.
math, let's use that.
Right. 4,000 square foot
Okay,
home,
yep.
Gross floor area, and half of that would be 2,000.
Yep.
So you wouldn't be able to build a 2,000 square foot ADU. You would
Okay.
have to go to the lower threshold, which is 1,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, just so we understand what we're looking at here on the slide, this is reflective of the new zoning.
Yes.
That's so this is current. This isn't reflecting old Westborough zoning.
No.
This is current as of October 2024.
Correct.
Okay.
And we kept in line with the 1,000 square feet.
Yep.
But now you can do that in a detached structure also.
Okay. Gotcha.
Right.
Okay.
The state requirement is actually 900 square feet
Okay. Minimum.
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 Or
I
no,
don't know.
maximum.
Maximum. I'm sorry. Okay.
It's okay.
So it was a trick question.
Yeah, it's fine. So their language in the legislation says 900 square feet or half
Okay.
of the gross floor area.
Right, so
and
we gave a little more.
yeah, so we kept it consistent with what we currently require,
Okay. Okay.
which is 1,000 square
Okay.
feet.
And just looking at the pictures here, so it's interesting. So, we detached, that makes sense. Attached. And then, so it's interesting, kind of above garage, so you could expand. Obviously, there's, again, dimensional. You'd
Yeah.
have to maintain the height
Right.
allowances for, whatever district you're in, or whatever zoning district. Okay.
Right.
Or I guess you could build out an interior lower level
You could build a basement, finished basement.
with the necessary amenities, but it would have to have its own entrance.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It
All right.
must maintain that separate entrance.
Okay. Okay.
You can have a shared hall. So if you had a house where you had a shared hallway,
Sure.
you could
Yeah,
you
like
could
I
do
have,
that.
I have an old house, so kind of up down, or
Okay.
it's a little different. It's a 2-family, so that's a bad example. But you could, I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah. Yeah, so there's lots
okay.
of different options.
Interesting.
And, they're not, the size is really not intrusive to me and into the neighborhood. And
Yep.
for the smaller homes, I think the reason why the 50% of the gross floor area is important is because if you have a smaller home, like 1,000
I was just
square
gonna-
foot
yeah.
home, your requirement will be 500 square feet
right,
instead of the 1,000.
right. That's what I was
because-
going to ask you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
Because you want it to appear as a smaller unit. You don't want it to become another full single-family home.
Right. So again, just to be clear on that second bullet point, so the maximum allowed space is 1,000 in Westborough square feet.
Yes.
Okay, but it could be smaller based on the primary dwelling.
Yes.
Or let's say my home is 4,000 square feet and I want to put in a 700 square foot ADU, I can do that.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, it's up to that amount. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Great.
So, as I mentioned, for ADUs, now it's typically just approval from, I don't know why I wrote inspector of buildings. It's just be in building inspector.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
It's like
Right.
the director of planning.
Yeah.
I don't know.
The inspector of buildings.
It sounds more formal.
It does.
So approval from the building inspector
Yeah.
when they review the application. However, it must meet the restrictions like setback requirements, height requirements. You have to show that there's a prohibition on short-term rentals, which would generally be like in the deed restriction.
Okay, so that's what I was going to ask. So that would be in the deed restriction, or I don't know, are people like required to sign like an affidavit, or the deed services that? Like, and
Yeah, I think that's still a question that we have to figure out how other towns are handling that. I don't know the answer to that yet.
I mean, Westborough's a little bit different, that it's not like we're a seaside community where people are like, let me take, I mean, maybe,
Right.
sorry, maybe people are vacationing in Westborough. I don't know. Maybe they are.
Maybe.
But maybe they're going to vacation because Lake Chauncey is here. I don't know.
Yeah.
Possibly. But let's assume that that's not the case. Westborough is not exactly a vacation destination.
Right.
So the likelihood of that type of business being generated is,
Right.
I'm going to say, low risk to the town.
It is low risk, yeah.
But I guess how would we enforce it?
It's really by a complaint system.
Yeah.
So Airbnb or VRBO, they don't provide addresses for their rentals unless you rent it.
Okay.
So we would have no way of knowing unless there was a complaint about it, which is how I've handled it in other communities I've worked in.
Yeah.
It's just,
yeah.
you can't go out looking for them, unfortunately.
Right. And again, here in Westborough, if we were having this conversation in Nantucket, it's probably a different, conversation, right? Or Westerly, Rhode Island. Or
Right.
something
Yeah,
like that.
I don't think we have ever come up with a complaint for a short-term rental.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've never searched Westborough on Airbnb, but
And what's considered short term?
typically less than 30 days.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in some cases, a special permit may be required. So in Westborough, we do have many non-conforming lots and pre-existing non-conforming structures, which essentially means that your lot, when it was created, may have conformed to the zoning at that time, but zoning has since changed, and now it does not conform. The same with your structure.
So my house would be probably great. It was built in the 1880s, so
There was no zoning at that time.
Right, there was no zoning. So if I wanted to do that, then I would have to go through a ZBA process.
Potentially.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you're increasing the footprint, or if you're going into the setback more than what's allowed,
Sure.
then you probably have to go to the ZBA. But it's the same as you would for a single family home if you were doing an addition.
Yes.
Things
Yep.
like that.
Okay. And again, starts with the community development
Yeah.
planning department. Okay.
And right now in Westborough, we do allow for an increased size of the ADU through a special permit,
Okay.
and that will not change. Because oftentimes when we see that, it's because of accessibility reasons.
Okay.
So they may need a little larger of a ADU to accommodate for wheelchairs,
Sure.
things like that.
Sure. Okay.
And the 1,000 square feet just doesn't cut it. Or maybe their finished basement that they want to convert is already that size.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So even though 1,000 is the maximum, there may be some flexibility. Is that what I'm
Yes.
hearing you say?
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Depending on the reasons.
And the applicant would have
Yeah.
to provide that information.
Right.
Okay.
I can't
Okay.
speak for the ZBA, but I don't think they would just, do it because the person wanted a bigger
Yeah.
ADU. I think
Yeah, they
it has
have
to be tied
Sure,
to reasons.
Sure. And there's a very specific process for folks who aren't aware. When you're going before the zoning board of appeals, you have to provide notice to your neighbors. There's a whole process that you would have to undertake. So it's not like you just sort of submit a form and they review it and it gets stamped. It's
yes.
extensive.
Yep, it definitely
It
is.
So. Okay.
So the timeline here, so technically this goes into effect February 2nd with the
Okay.
legislation.
Okay.
So a big question is, well, what happens between February 2nd and town meeting, right?
Yep. Yep.
How zoning works, zoning changes work, is that the zoning becomes effective the first date of publication
Okay.
of the legal notice,
Okay.
and that's January 31st.
Okay.
Even if we didn't do that, though, this would still be in effect. on February 2nd.
When you say public notice, the Westborough town government public notice?
Yes, so we post it in the newspaper
Okay.
and the community advocate.
Okay.
You have to, the requirement is to post it twice, not less than, for the first one, not less than 14 days prior to the hearing.
Yep.
So those are the posting requirements I'm talking about.
Okay. And is there then, it looks like there is a scheduled public hearing.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So we'll be presenting to the select board on February 11th. And then on February 25th, we'll have the planning board public hearing.
Okay.
And then town meeting is March 22nd, where we will vote on this.
Right.
I will say that even if this is turned down at town
I was
meeting,
going to ask you that question. You're reading my mind.
yeah, the legislation will still be in place. This is
Interesting.
more of, this is what we're tailoring to Westborough, and we're putting in what we feel is the best for our community,
Okay.
based on the parameters in the legislation.
So, and will the proposed zoning bylaw, I always forget how this, it can't be, can it be more restrictive than the state?
No.
It cannot.
Right.
Okay. So
Right.
when you say we're tailoring it, what does that mean? Like,
Yeah. So,
give me an example.
yeah. So, like, we are allowed to choose whether we can prohibit short-term rentals.
Okay.
We chose to prohibit short-term rentals.
Okay.
If we just follow the legislation, that may not be the case
I understand.
because we don't have it in a bylaw.
Okay.
There's other requirements in there that, leave it up to the municipality to decide on how
Okay.
to handle things, and we wouldn't be able to. It'd be what the legislation requires.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So,
Yeah.
okay.
So this definitely guides us.
Sure.
It guides us a little better. And another thing in the legislation that was added was that the towns may opt in to do a special permit for a second ADU, and we decided we don't want to do that
Okay.
right now.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's take one at a time.
Right, one
I
at a
guess.
time.
Yeah, good. Okay.
So,
great.
but it is a protected use under 40A Section
Yes, thank
3,
you.
which, like I said, it protects religious uses, educational
Mm-hmm.
uses, some solar, things like that.
Yep.
This is just adding on to it that it's now a protected use.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Well, it's very common in other parts of the country, and other communities not far from here. I know Portsmouth, New Hampshire is a community where there's a lot of those. So,
Yes.
So, anyway, well, this is great. So, if folks want to hear more about this, you can. You saw the dates on the screen. So February 11th. Jenny will be presenting to the select board, and agendas are, of course, always posted. Those meetings usually start at 6 p.m. and the agenda follows from there. February 25th will be the public hearing in front of the planning board. So if you want to come and share your comments with the planning board, that's the time to do that. Again, meeting will be publicly posted and actually has already been
Yes.
posted, or will be posted on January 31st. I'm
Yes.
sorry.
Yep.
So look at the community advocate.
Right.
Or and then of course we'll vote on this at town meeting on March 22nd. So best to get those questions out in advance before town meeting if you can, so that you feel comfortable with your vote at town meeting.
Right. Yeah. And if you have any questions or comments, come in and talk to me or any of my staff, and we're happy to help answer those questions.
Excellent. Jenny, if I can, you're going to be like, oh God, you have some resources before I ask one more
I
question.
do, and I know obviously people can't click their TVs or tap on their TV. Maybe they can.
Maybe,
I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'll post this on our website also. But these are
great.
some really great resources to just understand more about the history of ADUs and just types of ADUs around the country, and not just from our state website. So it's AARP. There's a whole research paper done on it. And then probably my favorite resource is the famous ADUs in movies and TV.
Yeah. Well, and I have looked at the AARP documents. They're easy to follow. No
Yeah.
offense, but sometimes
No, they
some of it is
are.
but they really are.
Yeah.
You can kind of get a sense of what
Right.
the options are, and if someone is looking at doing this, it's a great resource to start with, and then kind of say, okay, here's where I'm at. Here's
Yeah.
what I think I'd like to do, and
Right.
go from there.
Absolutely. We
Right.
should make more zoning like that, just
Yeah.
like a picture book almost.
I love those pictures, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Can we do that for other things? I don't know. I'll think about it. Speaking of town meeting, if you're not prepared to answer this question, that's fine.
That's okay.
I know that there's an article, or there's in the budget is an increase to around the zoning, the coding update. Can you
Okay.
just preview that?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
That'd be great.
So we have a program called eCode 360, and it's how you can search our zoning bylaw instead of coming into the office and looking at a book that's 100 pages or so long, and or just a PDF online. So it allows you to search terms, and
Okay.
it will come up with what sections of the bylaw that's in.
Okay.
So every time we have to update it with a new bylaw, such as the one for the inclusionary zoning that passed at the recent town meeting,
Yep.
there's a cost to that
Okay.
because the company has to integrate it into the system.
Sure.
So I am asking for funding to be able to accommodate those costs,
Okay.
and that's the reason for that.
Okay. And is this resource available now to someone? Like, if
Yes,
they, and
yeah.
where would they find that on the website?
They can go to the planning department page. There's also a link on the building department page.
Okay.
But you can, it says zoning bylaws, and you can just click on it,
Okay.
and it will take you there, and it's so easy to search. There's a
Great.
search bar right at the top, and I use it every day.
Yeah, sure.
But if I want to see, what the requirements are for accessory dwelling units, which
Yep.
is currently in there, I
Yep.
can type in accessory dwelling units, and it will come up with all of the
Related.
areas that have that
Okay.
and highlight it for you.
Great.
You can also print specific sections of the bylaw.
Okay.
So it's very user-friendly.
Great.
And it's a great system to
Okay.
have.
Great. Thanks for previewing that article.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for being on today. Really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Folks, I hope you found this information from Jenny informative. Again, always she and her department are available as a resource to you well beyond this show and this presentation, so please don't hesitate to reach out. I do want to just give you a heads up of some other upcoming events. On March 2nd is town-honored and beloved event of Troop 100 and the Pancake Breakfast. So tickets can be found, they're being sold at various locations throughout town, but you can buy them right there at the door as well. So that's March 2nd. So go and support the troop and get out and really engage in the community. It's a fun event. And later in the day on March 2nd, the Westborough Democratic Committee annually hosts a forum for elected candidates. So we have competitive races for the school committee and select board, and they will those candidates will be there that night. And usually Westborough TV covers that event. I presume they will again, hopefully. And but that event will be held at the Willows, as it always is. I want to thank the Westborough Democratic Committee for hosting it. I should caveat, because we're in these times, it's a nonpartisan event. They just happen to be doing this for many, many years, for as long as I can remember, and but all are welcome. So with that, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the 01581 Let's Talk. I hope you find this content valuable. If you ever have any suggestions for new content, please feel free to email me at my town email address. That's smarshall@westboroughma.gov. And until the next show, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and have some fun. Thanks.